June the 24th, Midsummer's Day. In Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, Titania, the queen of the fairies, lived on, quote, a bank where the wild thyme blows, where oxlip and the nodding violet grows, quite over canopied with lush woodbine, with sweet musk roses and with eglantine. This day has always been one of celebration. Bonfires were lit at dawn to drive away any demons which were thought to congregate in dense woodland. Some men wore garlands of flowers, whilst others dressed as devils, Jesus, or giants. Ferns, whose flowers were never seen, were thought to bloom on this day. They would be sought out, as they were thought to be magical and capable of conferring wisdom as well as invisibility on the picker. Cackle was sometimes driven through the embers of a fire, this harking back to an earlier time when sacrifices were made. Women collected shoots of orpine, sedum telethium, to test their lovers. If the leaves bent to the right, the lover was true, and if to the left, they were false. Beetles. Among our beetles, the stag beetle are the largest and the most impressive. They can be found all over London, although the lesser stag beetle, Daucus parallelipipedus, is one of the most commonly seen. The greater stag beetle, Lucanus cereus, can be distinguished from the lesser not just by its size, but also by its colour. The greater has a violet sheen, whereas the lesser is matte black. It is the male greater that has the enormous elongated mandibles or antlers, from which it gets its name. The females are more difficult to separate unless you look at the spines on their legs. 2, 3, or 4 spines indicates it is a greater, whereas 1 spine indicates a lesser. The females may live as little as a month as an adult before they lay their eggs and then die. In the past, they were believed to carry lighted coals and be responsible for thatched roofs catching fires. All 3 of our native stag beetles occur on Wimbledon Common. The third member of this family is the rhinoceros beetle, Cynodendron cylindricum, which has been found on rotten beech logs near Queensmere on the Common. Click beetles, or skipjacks, get their name from their ability to click loudly. This they do whilst leaping to right themselves if they have fallen on their backs. They are usually elongated with dull colours and found in long grass. The wireworm beetle, Agriotes obscurus, is a common species, and Stenogostrus rhombus is one of the largest and most impressive. Both can be found on Wimbledon Common. Flower beetles, as their name suggests, are often found wandering around on flower heads. One species which is noticed more than most is the thick-legged flower beetle, Odomira nobilis. It is a bright metallic green beetle which appears to have shiny muscular legs. It can be found on Hutchinson's Bank. Longhorn beetles are among the most arresting due to their absurdly long antennae. They are also often finely coloured and patterned. There are 60 different species in Britain, many of which are nectar feeders, if they eat at all. Ruislip and Ashstead woods are places where they may be found. The rare Agapanthia villoso viridescens, which has banded antennae, has been recorded on Horston Hill. 2 other impressive longhorns, Rupella maculatum and Leptura quadrifasciata, have been found in Oxshott Wood. The timberman, Acanthocynus aedilis, is the most expressive of all. The male has antennae 4 or even 5 times as long as its body, perhaps up to 7 centimetres in length. It breeds in remnants of the Caledonian pine forests in Scotland, but occasionally travels down to London in transported pine logs, where the male flies. When the male flies, he trails his formidable antennae behind him. Chafers, for example the rose chafer, Setonia aurata, look very like the scarab beetles in the ancient Egyptians set into rings. It is a sizable beetle, 2 centimetres, with unforgettable greenish gold, almost lacquered wing cases. It also has the telltale short-fanned antennae, so typical of chafers generally. We still see garden chafers, Philopertha horticola, but far fewer of the larger chafers so loved by bats. Jewel beetles are famous for their bright jewel-like colours, although those found in London are not particularly brightly coloured. They tend to be bullet-shaped, with the tip of the bullet being the rear end. Agropylus panonicus, which has been found on Hampstead Heath, is perhaps an exception, having a greenish gloss at its front end and a bluish gloss at its rear. Agrilus laticornis is similar and much more likely to be seen. The rosemary beetle, which is a leaf beetle, is much more what you might expect of a jewel beetle. It is covered in bright iridescent purple and green stripes and easily seen on rosemary and lavender plants in our gardens. Other leaf beetles Other beetles are also brightly coloured, none more so than the famous Colorado beetle that attacks potato crops. One worth looking for is the mint beetle, Chrysalina menthrasti, which is a bright metallic green. It is found on mints in damp places. Leaf beetles are generally recognized by their often bright colors, their ladybird-like shape, and their habit of drawing in their legs and falling to the ground when touched. Flea beetles are also leaf beetles. They often have thick thighs, which they use to jump, rather like fleas, rather than drop to the ground. At this time of year, some of the most noticeable beetles we see are those on the flower heads of umbelliferous plants such as hogweed. These are the soldier beetles, so called because of their long narrow bodies and typical black and red military colours. Sailor beetles are very similar, but often more blue in colour, and therefore more typical of the navy. Darkling beetles, like so many others, are usually a nondescript brown or black. Many are pest species to be found in stored products such as flour or dried fruit. The live mealworms bought in pet shops to feed birds and reptiles are actually the larvae of a darkling beetle, Tenebrio mollitor, and if left, quickly turn into adults. Other more typical darkling beetles live in rotten wood, often in ancient woodland. For example, Cylindronotus Leviotriostratus in Dulwich woods. There are other beetles that are easier than most to identify, at least partially, in the field. This can be for various reasons. For example, oil beetles have their enormous abdomens, and cardinal beetles are often cardinal red in colour. Pollen beetles are found massed in among the anthers of flowers, and bark beetles in galleries just beneath the surface of the bark on trees. Fungus beetles should be looked for on wild mushrooms, and mole beetles eating mildew. Whirligig beetles are easy enough to encounter careering around the surface of ponds, but click beetles clicking, bombardier beetles exploding, or glowworm beetle larvae glowing less so. One last beetle worth an excursion to find is the small old gold leaf or tortoise beetle, which inhabits the chalk meadows at high elms. If picked up, they often fly away immediately, in a way that is reminiscent of the golden snitch in the game of Quidditch. It is also a good time of year to look for ladybirds, not just the common species already mentioned, that is 2, 7, 10, 14 and 22 spot, but also some of the less common species. The pine ladybird, Exocomus 4 postulatus, is found in both pine and broadleaf woods. It is mainly black with either 4 or 18 red spots. The rare Adonis beetle, Hippodamia variegata, can be found on rough ground within the Lee Valley. The orange ladybird, Halesia 16 guttata, is larger and more striking than most, and has a preference for eating mildew on sycamore trees. Occasionally, alien ladybirds, such as the Australian Vedelia beetle, Rhodolia cardinalis, turn up on imported plants, but it is the voracious appetite of the recently arrived harlequin ladybird, Harmonia axiridis, that is still causing the most concern. The name Harmonia may be propitious. In mythology, she possessed a necklace which brought misfortune to anyone who wore it. Its arrival could potentially be a great misfortune for our resident ladybirds, as it can have 2 or 3 generations a year and is still an active predator when other ladybirds are hibernating.